Yeah, I grew up in a little village in Holland, in Heemstede, close to Haarlem, the original Haarlem, that Haarlem here was called after. And from little baby onwards, as I started to look around, there was a very special thing on the nightstand of at my parents' bed on my father's side, was a little clock. And that is this little clock. And it is not a usual clock. It is actually a clock from the dashboard of a Second World War fighter plane. And of course, as a little baby, you don't realize what it is. But as I grew up, I learned that there is an amazing story behind this clock. My father, Bodo Sandberg, was a fighter pilot in the Dutch Air Force. And after the German invasion and occupation of Holland, he managed to escape and go to England. From there, he was sent to the Royal Dutch Military Flying School, which had moved to America in Jackson, Mississippi. And from there, he was sent to Australia and then on to New Guinea, from where he had to fight the Japanese. When he was in New Guinea, there was an amazing event, which was actually not related to the war, but amazing nonetheless. Because one day on the military base, they got a Mayday call from one of the missionaries in the middle of the jungle in New Guinea, where there was a nurse with an acute appendicitis, and she had to be airlifted out of there. But they looked around on the military base. They were all fighter planes, single-seaters. There was not a plane that they could fly to the airstrip to pick up a passenger. So they looked around, and in a dusty corner of one of the hangars, there was an old plane that had been standing there for the longest time. Nobody knew what it was, or how it got there, or if it would even fly. But there was great rush. I mean, there had to be immediate airlift. So they pushed this thing out of the hangar into the sun, dusted it off, fueled it up, checked the oil, and with a lot of effort, with the big clouds of smoke, they got the engine to start. Very difficult. And so he had no time to check the instruments, just rush off, take off, and set course on his compass to the direction where this airstrip was to pick up this nurse who had to go to a hospital. Of course, in those days there was no GPS or anything. All he had was time to check his distance and the compass course, magnetic compass. And so after the given length of time that he had to be above that airstrip, he looked down and there was no airstrip in sight. And so he checked on the radio, there was just static, no radio contact at all. Now he starts to question his instruments that he had no time to check. And to check the deviation of the compass, he flew a straight line on a fixed point on the horizon. And as he was flying a straight course, not only the compass was off, it was actually turning slowly while he was flying straight. So the compass was completely unreliable. Now this meant two things right away. First of all, he would not be able to find the airstrip with the nurse, and indeed my story does not know what happened to the nurse. She probably succumbed, I don't know. But it also meant that he could not find his way back to his own airbase because he had no direction. And then, of course, your fuel goes down. Where do you go? New Guinea is all tropical jungle, trees. There are no roads, there is no place where you can land. But he had to think very quickly. He said, obviously New Guinea is an island, albeit a huge one, but it has beaches at the coast, at the shorelines. Maybe he can put this plane down on the beach. Hopefully it's low tide. Now, to find the beach without a compass, still without a compass of course, he found a river. Of course, all rivers flow to a beach, so he followed the river downstream. And as he was flying down with his fuel lower and lower and lower, he looked down and he saw various villages of the Papua local people. And all those villages, of course, all you see from the air is roofs, was round thatch roof huts from the Stone Age. Except there was one little village as he got closer to the shore with a square roof with corrugated steel. So he said, he thought by himself, he said, hey, they must have contact with my kind of world. So he said, if I make it out of this plane alive, I'll have to try to get back to that village. So he flew down and he got to the beach, and he was lucky. There was low tide and there was a hard beach that he could actually properly land on. The plane is intact. And in the mangrove on the shore, he sees all sorts of movement, and there is a lot of people there. Papuas that are, some tribes are known to be cannibals, and so he has no idea how they're going to have him for lunch, on the menu or as a guest. He was lucky because they had never seen anybody coming down from the sky, and they had never seen a white person. So he got a very special welcome. But before he got out of his plane, he prepared himself for survival in the jungle. And navigation, of course, finding direction is totally important. His compass was shot. But what he could do is dead reckoning. That is, on time and the position of the sun, you can have a compass course. So not only his wristwatch, but in the dashboard of the plane was a little clock with 4 screws, and that is this little clock here. And he unscrewed this from the dashboard on the beach in Papua New Guinea because his life depended on it. And this little clock survived the whole war, and he brought it home with him. And he had it on his nightstand when I was born, and I recognized the very soft ticking of it. And this, of course, is a very strong association with my dad. But indeed, when he made it to that village with the Papuas, he tried to communicate to them that he wanted to go up the river. But how do you talk to these people? There's no language, they didn't read or write. How do you communicate? It took a few weeks to get that message across. They were very friendly, helpful. And indeed, one day, with a hollowed out tree trunk, with 12 rowers, they rowed up the river to that village, and there in the corrugated steel roof hut, there was actually a missionary with a radio, and there he could report back. He was missing in action for weeks.